This is Secrets to Win Big, your roadmap to sustained growth. Brought to you by Arjun Sen, founder and CEO of Zen Mango, top brand growth driver, and a former Fortune 500 executive who has been called one of the most marketing intelligent minds in the business. Find him at zenmango.com. And now, here's your host, Arjun Sen.
Welcome to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen. Hi, this is Arjun. Now, I've always found that winning is fun, but winning big puts us on the path for sustained long-term wins. And the very fact each one of us are different, our starting points are different, our destinations are different, and even the path we choose are different. In this podcast, I really love the fact that I get a chance to have conversations with leaders from all walks of life all over the world. And in that spirit, today, it's truly an honor and a pleasure to welcome my VIP guest, Kelly Christiano. Kelly Christiano has been an innovator and a change agent in multiple industries, and she continues a career of 30 years and counting of big wins and big impacts. And that is what I really got fascinated about her accomplishments is multiple different brands, big impact sustained over time. If that is not a big win career, I don't know what it is. Currently, she is the Chief Marketing Officer for Transact, a financial tech company that provides services to more than 1,300 colleges and universities. Kelly is known for setting strategies to generate leads and drive revenue, and she has transformed the marketing at Transact to propel growth. Kelly, welcome to Secrets to Win Big.
Thank you, Arjun. I'm so happy to be here. It's really been an exciting ride, a wild ride. And this past year has been actually really been a great life, despite all the difficulties that, we've all lived through. I joined Transact about 6 months ago, and they're a leader out there in the payment space. We're a fintech in payments, which is a very hot space right now. You mentioned we work with over 1,300 campuses. And to give you a sense of scale, we also process over $45 billion in payments annually, providing not just payment services, but also campus ID and campus commerce solutions.
So tell me a little bit more about what Transact does and why you chose to make an impact. You could have gone to a lot of places. Why you chose Transact?
Yeah, so really, I had a very unique fit with Transact. Although I've worked in some different companies and industries, there's been this thread where the companies I've worked for and in the positions I've been in have worked with higher education, almost all of them. While I worked for Aramark Corporation at the start of my career, I worked in their campus division and I launched their first e-business product in the campus space. I also I worked in information technology for Aramark, but I did a point of sale solution and launched their first remote information technology support team for the campus space. So I spent a lot of time on college campuses running that business. I also worked in the field for the first couple of years on college campuses for Aramark. So, and then throughout more recently, as I worked across the financial services space, I also worked for companies that helped people save for college and then later pay for college. So, it's just this sort of interesting thread. And so as the Transact opportunity came up, I thought, well, very interesting that I actually had some specific experience in a while earlier in my career, but in some of Transact's specific product space. But I also feel very endeared to this higher education space, and probably partly because of my personal journey as well. I mean, higher education certainly changed my life.
So I just want to pick up on the importance of higher education and reading a little bit about you. I want to start at the very beginning about how you grew up in a working class neighborhood, humble beginnings in a Boston area, and you were one of the first members of your family to go to college, and you just didn't go to college. You went all the way, Harvard and then MBA from Wharton. Can you talk to me a little bit about the importance of education in your life? What was the inspiration? And then what brought you back to give back in the academic field?
Yes, thank you. It's funny. My dad, who started college, but for a very short time and didn't for a few months actually, and then had to leave for some reasons. Very smart man, always talked about education being the key to allowing you to do anything you wanted to do. And he worked very hard his whole life, but he always talked about that. And the other thing was he had a friend who he had worked with briefly and stayed a friend who had gone to Harvard. Now, that never translated into my dad saying, oh, you should go to Harvard. Instead, he would tell stories, and he would light up in a certain way as he would tell stories about how this friend was very impressive at work and how he handled himself in certain ways in a business environment. And it made such an impression upon me that I guess I just sort of took that in a certain way. And so by the time I was in high school and starting to think about college, because it was always assumed I would say that I would go to college, which was an interesting twist because in the town I grew up in, just outside of Boston, it was the kind of town where some people did go to college, but many did not, right? It was just different. And many other very good careers, but didn't go to college. I just kind of said, well, I'd like to go to Harvard, right? And, it's funny because you think about that now, as we know as adults, what an ambitious goal that is to think I want to go to such a highly selective school. And yet, as a naive young person, I knew it wasn't a slam dunk, but I didn't appreciate what a highly ambitious goal that was. And then I got in.
So I have to ask you the question.
Yes.
So your dad never put pressure, but had amazing stories.
Yes.
You had incredible dreams and you worked your backside off, you got in. Can you tell me a little bit about the interaction you and your dad had when dad realized his amazing daughter is going to Harvard?
Yes, there was a lot of jumping up and down because I got a big envelope. Right back in those days, everything was sent via direct mail. Right nowadays, some things are still digital, even in that acceptance, in the college acceptance space. Some things have moved digitally. It was real excitement, crazy pride. And I'm also an only child. So, my mom and dad were very excited. And to go from, nobody's gone to college to now my daughter's going to go to Harvard. I mean, my mother still, doesn't matter how old you are, your parents still treat you a certain way. My mother still brags about her daughter who went to Harvard. So even though I'm an adult.
And, to me, I think relating from a parent to a parent, my baby, my daughter, she always wanted to go to UPenn. And for undergrad, she went to NYU, didn't make it to UPenn. But for her PhD, when she got into UPenn, I right away, as a dad, I had to ask you the question because I will never forget that morning when she got her admission. And, to me, I really feel that if I have to look at top 2 or 3 moments in my life, that's one of those. And I'm so glad you shared the amazing moment with your parents.
Yes, thank you.
So now the other side of the question is great education, but not everybody who goes to Harvard and Wharton dedicates their life to impacting higher education. What got you back? Because as I go through your whole bio, at different places, different ways, you have, if we do a math, you have impacted literally millions of students. So what got you back to impact in higher education instead of a lot of different places?
Yeah, I think, starting at Aramark, a very large company, was a great place to work. I spent 11 years of my career there. Being back in that college experience, I worked while I was in college. My mom and dad contributed, but I also worked and I also took out some student loans, and it was a busy time. I'd like to say it was a great experience, but it was also, it was hard. Then as I got older, so I started at Aramark and I thought, well, geez, this working with college campuses and helping the campuses make things easier for the student experience felt good. While I was, starting my career and making a living and learning different things. And then as I progressed in my career, I thought I started to really appreciate, I guess, what difference the college degree and experience had made for me. I don't necessarily have to work within higher education to still make an impact on higher education. And so as I continued and worked in financial services, even where the financial services institutions are working with higher institutions of higher ed, we did all kinds of things, provided business services, provided ways to pay for education through banking and other opportunities, provided scholarships, financial literacy resources. So you could just tell because you measure everything, as you know, as a marketer, you measure everything as you're doing these things. And you could see, and sometimes you're working directly with both the customers you're serving as well as people you're awarding scholarships to, et cetera. And you can just see close up and personal the difference that you're making.
And to me, it's also the magnitude of difference, because when I'm looking at each one of these brands, Aramark, Sally Mae, VIP Desk. So what makes play at the highest level at any and all of these organizations? Like, what is the unique superpower that you have that makes the business journey so successful?
Yeah, I think it boils down to being very versatile and committed, not being afraid, or I guess not letting that fear get in the way if fear ever pops up. So I'm able to, when I say versatile, I mean, I have spanned across, I learned very quickly, and I've spanned across sales and marketing, operations and IT, and at whatever period of time I've been able to flex that whichever muscle needed to be flexed the most to excel in that particular role. And then, as I say, the fear, I've been able to jump at opportunities and say, yes, I'll go do that. Or within a role, say, let's try to launch something new or look at a new offering. And I don't think you can win big if you're not trying new things. Doesn't mean they're all going to work, because they don't. But you can't be afraid of trying new things. You can't be afraid of failure, because you won't win big unless you're trying new things.
And I also like the blend of two things you just said. One is that whole spirit of let's try something new, the adventure. But at the same time, you also talked about, I am going to do it. Because, to me, also during my days in the corporate world, that's the kind of leader I want to work with. The leader who inspires us on a new journey, but also he or she is ready to roll up his or her sleeves and be part of the journey instead of saying, guys, go figure it out. So I want to from there move a little bit to branding, and a favorite passion area of mine. So let's talk about your current journey. As you look at Transact, what has been your vision and, again, secret sauce of redefining the brand and positioning this global brand, which is viewed by millions of students?
So I think Transact is at a precipice. We've got so much opportunity. There's been work coming in to just do so much more, to look at the brand, I think, in a fresh way. Transact became a new company just about 2 years ago. So it's a brand that's been around for several decades, and yet became an independent company about 2 years ago. And so now's the time to say, okay, how can we be fresh? Our clients are colleges and universities, and yet through those colleges and universities, we're providing many very valuable and needed services to students and sometimes families. So we need to keep both the end consumer as well as our client in mind with everything we do. We did transform, sort of step one, transformation of the website in January, and it has been a great step forward. I would say we are not done there. So we've got more exciting things to come. And we're trying to make sure that in everything that we're doing, there is integration, consistency. So I guess that's the best way to say it, integration, consistency, and that we're marketing in some innovative ways across channels. And we're doing a lot of testing. There are a lot of new things happening right now, some of which people in the marketplace can see and some that they haven't seen yet. And our brand has taken one step forward, and you will see more to come.
So as you take the brand through this incredibly fascinating journey forward, how do you see things that others do not? Because you also inferred to earlier, it's all about doing new things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But I feel that there's a visionary hidden behind who starts seeing the future. So what's that skill? Like, how do you see future directions? How do you sort those out by saying, yeah, this is what I go after, this is what I don't? How do you do that?
First, I try to learn everything I can and listen to everyone in the process, right? So I come in and listen to everyone and bring a lot of people into the process too. so that I can synthesize all that information for my own opinion. I don't pretend that I'm the only one who has the great ideas, because often you find that other people have great ideas, or they might have the nugget of an idea that then can be blossomed into what will be the final big idea. And look for experts across the landscape as well to bring in for a piece of something, right? So with branding, I think it helps to bring in an expert who can help you sort of talk through the process, right? We've been through these processes at places before to pull out, the right thought process. And then, then I guess with experience, you get to the right end vision. And I guess that's really what it comes to.
So again, you're very driven. As you're looking at listening to ideas, picking up these nuggets, having the end vision, how do you define success?
Yeah. So success, I think, comes down to, it can be pretty simple. Our clients need to succeed. The team needs to succeed. The company needs to meet or hopefully exceed its goals. And then I would like to find that there's a personal connection where I'm working so that I can find some meaning in what I'm doing. I think that sort of hits things at a high level. If you can walk away at the end of the day saying, I've met those objectives, then I think you feel as though you've achieved success.
And again, I love the humility through the whole conversation of you put every other goal first, and then you put your personal connection. To me, I really think it's a very refreshing thing in the corporate world where many a time you hear and living the whole team concept, putting the company and the team first really is kind of inspiring. So on inspiration, we talked a little bit about your dad and your mom. Who else inspired you the most or influenced you most in your journey?
I think one thing I didn't mention is my mom worked. And so that is one thing that had an imprint on me as well. And as a woman who worked, early in the 70s, she also had responsibility for about 99% of personal and home activities, which tended to be kind of the price you paid if you were a working woman back then. And I think that left an impression on me in a good way overall, because it meant, okay, women could go and have a career. I would say at another juncture of my career, I worked for a serial entrepreneur. That was at VIP Desk. And she is a very driven, fun, smart person. And since I had been in corporate America before then, it was a very refreshing and eye-opening experience to then go and work for someone who was a serial entrepreneur in a startup business. And, we remain friends to this day. That left its own impressions with me. And I think a whole new perspective for that next chapter in my career. And then I look to read all kinds of things. I think as lots of us in these kind of positions do. I think Seth Godin is just great. His books are, at many times, they're inspirational, but also practical, and sometimes make you think outside the box, and sometimes make you just rethink of things that you kind of haven't thought of in a while. So I like all the things he does. I'm kind of obsessed with the remote work thing. I'm reading this thing on remote work revolution because that was one of the things I did way back when. And now the last year, we all have to think about remote work. So yeah, I think I look for a lot day-to-day inspiration from various things I can read out there.
So you talked a lot about books. If you were to take a month off or 2 or 3 months off to write a book right now about your life, what would you title that book?
Oh, about my life. I have started writing a book, but it's not about my life. It's sort of fiction. I would write my story with the slant of sharing that you don't have to have your plan mapped out, because I did not have my plan mapped out. I still feel that I've been very successful despite the fact that I didn't really start off knowing where I wanted to go. Share that I've been supported by many people, that I learned to be able to ask for support, ask for help, get people to work with me. You need to surround yourself with people who are really good and smart, and not be afraid that somehow they're going to take your job, because actually that's what you're paid to do. You're supposed to plan on succession and hope that somebody takes your job, because then you'll move on to the next great thing. So I think there'd be some theme about that from a career perspective, and share some thoughts I have around making choices and trade-offs and things like that.
To me, I'm very fascinated about the concept of choices, because to me, I just feel there's so much of books are written on leadership, but Leadership is all about choices. It's the choices that you make today and I make today will define our future and our team's future. And that's such an intriguing, interesting concept. I also want to go back a little bit on your book. You talked about the fiction. So can you talk about a little bit about what it is, when it is coming out, what was the
Yeah.
vision behind?
I've not talked about this with anyone publicly. I believe my husband may be the only person who knows I've started writing my book, maybe my best friend. I just got inspired a couple of years ago. I was sitting at a conference and my mind wandered to something and I thought of this. I had this thought and I came home and I started writing this book. And I'm in just a few chapters. When COVID hit, I thought, well, now I'll be trapped at home and I'll actually get to it. And instead, I went to another path from a career perspective and didn't get back to the book. So, but it is about fantasy and a little bit mystery. And so it will be, if I can finish it, I will one day finish it. I don't know if anyone will, we'll see if how many people want to read it, but I enjoy the process of creating it, put it that way.
Yeah, and I also believe that with your track record and passion, so once it is done, I would personally say that that book is going big because every person who reads will appreciate it. And I'm right away thinking the Oscar for adapted screenplay goes to Kelly Christiano. Hey, let's dream big. Okay.
Very kind, Arjun. I did get a concept for another book of a very serious nature just this morning. And I think that might have more legs. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted on that one.
Oh, absolutely. So with all your wisdom, Kelly, if you could go back and talk to the kid who is getting ready to apply to Harvard, what would be one advice you would give her?
Don't be so intimidated your freshman year. When you get to Harvard in particular in your freshman year, it was very intimidating because so many very smart people from all over the world. And I had this feeling that everybody knew things that I didn't know. And the funny thing is, by the time you got to your junior year, everybody finally relaxed enough to admit that they all thought the same thing. But when you got there your freshman year, it was a very intimidating place. And so that would be one thing. It made for a very stressful freshman year.
Now, here's a personal question. I feel that success that doesn't have a process or a plan cannot be repeated. And with you, with 30 years of success, and now you're an author, are you comfortable sharing a ritual or a work ritual that you go through, how you start your day, and what the last thing you do when you're wrapping your workday?
Yeah, sure. See, I do think planning is key. So I just didn't have a vision for what I wanted to be. I have a nephew who knew from the time he was in high school, he wanted to be not only a doctor, but an orthopedic surgeon. And I mean, he followed that through. I just didn't know what I wanted to do from a career standpoint, but I have really very, very well organized. I am a crazy planner, both in my personal and my professional life. And so I map out at the end of the day, I map out my next day. I look at my calendar all week, every week, the next week, and I make lists. I am an obsessive list maker also in my personal life. And so I'm always checking against, am I staying on top of all these details? I'm also a really, really good delegator, which is something that I found through my career. I try to, as I've worked with people who are advancing their careers, I try to teach them as they're coming up the ladder and they finally have people working for them they can delegate to. That is something that some people struggle to learn. And you can't be successful as a very strong independent contributor. You can't be successful then with a team unless you start to learn how to delegate. So I would say that's another thing that I would say is really important, to always be looking ahead, no matter how busy you are today. If you're not looking ahead and planning ahead and setting deadlines for yourself and pretty much staying on, doesn't mean occasionally things don't get in the way a little bit, but I don't see how you can be successful.
I also love the advice on delegation because each one of us have 24 hours in a day and we all must make choices. And a big part of choices come from what you delegate and what you don't. So Kelly, this is such a fascinating conversation. So anything else you want the listeners to know about you, your work that we have not talked about already?
I think you can really win big as long as you are preparing, trying new things, not letting your fear get in the way, and considering that, a big win can be defined differently in different businesses, in different parts of your life. And I think that it feels good when you win big, and you shouldn't be afraid to think big and win big.
Thank you.
At Transact, we are on a path as a fintech to win big.
So, Kelly, let's say we have a follow-up podcast and the year is 2030. Where would Kelly brand be?
I will continue to be working with higher education in some way, shape, or form. There is no doubt about that. I am absolutely committed to continue to work in the higher education landscape to help students achieve their dreams of higher education.
And I love the clarity that you have in this. So, Kelly, this is such a fascinating conversation. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking time today to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjun.
So thank you all for another fascinating conversation. There are quite a few different threads in this conversation, but the biggest thing for me was not to let fear get in the way. And I really glad you shared about that young professional who is getting ready to start a journey and had a dream. And you stating the dream and then accomplishing that and going beyond. And of course, you had your parents, now you have your husband, amazing fans in your life. And the phrase that really will stick with me is, don't let fear get in the way. Kelly, I wish you the very best in your career ahead. And thank you all for listening. This is Arjun, and very soon we'll bring you another conversation with another thought leader from another walk of life. Thank you and happy listening.
You've been listening to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen, founder and CEO of Zen Mango, top brand growth driver, and a former Fortune 500 executive who has been called one of the most marketing intelligent minds in the business. To learn more, visit www.zenmango.com. Share this podcast with your friends and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.